Alrighty, week 15, learn together. I just finished implementing this for the email API, which that's what you need to do, of course, for this week. And as I was doing the work, I realized that we really aren't, and this is true for a couple of reasons. We really aren't doing anything different than what Andrew did. It's more just getting the experience again. And again, this is great prep for us to move into our final leg of developing this for our own apps. But I just highlighted kind of 3 bullet points that really are quite involved. So just to give you that summary, right, of what you need to do. So you need to update your user model to allow for schema. So this is a great discussion about the benefits of using schema with that Mongoose gives you the ability to use a schema. And then implementing a password using bencrypt.js actually to be specific, in order to save the user password encrypted, because that, of course, if you're going to write, and in this case we are writing our own authentication, we have to think about, there's just no way around ever not encrypting a password. And so it's really great to see this, how relatively easy this is to do. So updating that user model to allow for that, also doing unique uh, requiring unique. I know it's one line inside the model, but it's really important to do that, right? So getting all that running, of course, is a great experience. And then implementing JWT tokens, adding that middleware directory and using it on the required routes, that JavaScript web token concept and how to implement it, using again a library, relying on that library to generate those tokens, understanding the 3 pieces of that token, right? So if I was to just move over real quick, I'm logged in. And when I do that, I now have a new attribute on my user, which is, you can see this encrypted password, which is awesome. And also these tokens, so that password is important. We have to use it, but how do we then tell the browser request that this user is authenticated? And we do it by using these tokens. And these tokens are really involved, but not. The nice thing is we're somewhat abstracted from them by using the JWT token library, but the fact that they have multiple parts, we set these secret keys. There's just, and then we can just use them. So like once they're set, we can just use them. And hopefully you got the idea here that because this tokens is an array, you can have multiple tokens for many different locations that you're logged into. Okay. So, that just understanding first what they are, how they're being used, and then implementing that middleware to handle that, right? So that when on any route that you have authentication required, you would then put that auth as, right before your async. I think you can do it either way, it doesn't matter, but it's more that if for anything to run, right, it's going to be in the middle. And he had a great example in the video where he was showing, right, when middleware runs, in this case for our auth, we're writing a middleware to handle it. If something happens in there, right, we're not going to call next. We're going to stop the execution right there and send back the message. So this, again, we're not doing anything different. It's just getting another level of understanding by redoing it. And as I've said before, I definitely challenge you to do this without doing a detailed review of the code. Now, if you get stuck, obviously I want you to go back and look at it, but the idea is for you to implement it without it as much as possible. But I know it's also a lot of code and just a lot of concepts to keep straight. So the last major topic here, and it's one that really is just going to make our lives easier, is just the idea that we can update Postman to use these environments. And even though in our course we're not going to be going to the place to actually deploy it to Heroku, the ability to reference that URL, it will be something that is good for you to know for future development. and just understanding how to set up these environmental variables so that you can change these then variables that you have in Postman. And you really start to see some of the really great benefits of Postman. But of course, I think the authorization, writing the test, is probably the most beneficial because I remember in the course before this that I used of Andrew's before he updated it. It was such a pain to actually grab that auth token every time you logged in. And this is such an easy way to write these tests to actually grab that auth token and then populate it through the system, and not on the individual routes, but at the collection level, right? So that is like, it's such, and again, it's once you've done it, you really see that at the collection level, it's going to grab that token. And it's just really makes productivity, makes that so much easier. And again, we're only doing that in the create and the login, because those are the two places we're actually setting that. So, and that was the other thing, is seeing how we can rewrite the routes for create user to just go ahead and log them in, which makes sense, right? And you've seen this. Sometimes you see sites make you create a user account and then they make you log in, and it's really nicer. We could talk about the benefits either way of actually doing that, but the ability for you create a user, automatically log in. Okay, so that's a summary of what you need to do. This is, of course, the video coming. We're at week 15. I want you to, of course, do this work for our email app that we have in the Learn Together directory, and just keep an eye on where we're at. And I'm going to roll up these weeks just to kind of make this a little easier for us, right? I realized today that week 16 lectures is going to finish out our Udemy course, and I do have a Learn Together for week 17. But next week, you finish the part of the Udemy course that we are going to cover. And then we will have a Learn Together for week 16, of course, where we finish this up, implementing this. But then week 17 is just a Learn Together. And then boom, we're at the end. So I mentioned this in the attendance, and this is just good to understand, is that, and really it's going to be this next, these last videos right here where we talk about how to set up, these data relationships. And he's going to show two methods for doing this relationship between the user, and in this case, he's showing the task. You have to think about your app specific one. So of course, these last ones are way, way important. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed doing this work. It's really such a great experience to have walking away, to be able to see how to write your own authentication. I've said this before, but I think you have to actually do this in order to appreciate using somebody else's authentication. As an example of that, I'm actually using in the React course Google's authentication, and it's like so easy to use, partly because I understand what's being abstracted from me because of writing something like this. So much benefit. I know it may not feel like you're doing much yourself. It's more like making sure all the pieces, that you've put all the pieces together, right? Understanding how to generate those tokens, how to write that middleware, where to put it. And part of it's just organization, how to update the models. And by the way, that's the other thing that I didn't talk about here, but understanding on the models that the use of the methods to write method calls on a specific user that's logged in versus the statics that run for all of them is not talked about much. So I definitely would, and I'm sitting here looking at it myself just to remember, like it, and doing a little research more about that, I think is really beneficial. Of course, we understand now, hopefully, the idea of the schema and why that's great, right? Using that, implementing that schema. but also the difference between the methods and the static and the pre, right? Because we're writing these things on the model. So this is the user model. Now we're going to do some of this, of course, in the for the task for your specific one, and that's when you'll really want to hone in and get that concept. All right, enough from me. Let me know if you have any other questions you want to discuss more. I think, like I said, we are honing in on the end, but these are such great concepts to understand. So if you want to chat about them, please let me know. I'm totally open to that concept. Have a great one. You just need to post a link to your code and discuss what your experience was in doing this work for week 15. All right. By next week, I promise to have drafted the last develop two, which should not become a surprise because you're basically taking what you did for develop one and writing your API implementing authentication. Of course, the important thing here on top of all that is how to handle the data specific requirements, which I've been talking about. So for my email app, I did it in a way that probably wasn't the best, but I at least got it done. And you'll see that next week. All right. Have a good one. See you later.